Taking this as a signal, the Count prepared to push back his stool, but the young Brit was refilling his glass. "The caviar was a stroke of genius," he said. "But how did you manage it? You never left our sight." "A magician never reveals his secrets." The Brit laughed. Then he studied the Count as if with renewed curiosity. "Who are you?" The Count shrugged. "I am someone you have met in a bar." "No, that's not quite it. I know a man of erudition when I meet one. And I heard how the bartender referred to you. Who are you, really?" The Count offered a self-deprecating smile. "At one time I was Count Alexander Ilyich Rostov, recipient of the Order of St. Andrew, member of the Jockey Club, master of the hunt." The young Brit held out his hand. "Charles Abernethy, presumptive heir to the Earl of Westmoreland, financier's apprentice, and bowman of the losing Cambridge crew at Henley in 1920. The two gentlemen shook hands and drank, and then the presumptive heir to the Earl of Westmoreland studied the Count again. "This must have been quite a decade for you." "You could put it that way," said the Count. "Did you try to leave after the Revolution?" "On the contrary, Charles. I came back because of it." Charles looked at the Count in surprise. "You came back?" "I was in Paris when the Hermitage fell. I had left the country before the war due to certain circumstances." "You weren't an anarchist, were you?" The Count laughed. "Hardly." "Then what?" The Count looked into his empty glass. He hadn't spoken of these events in so many years. "It is late," he said, "and the story is long." By way of response, Charles refilled their glasses. So the Count took Charles all the way back to the fall of 1913, when, on an inclement night, he had set out for the 21st birthday of the Princess Novobatsky. He described the ice on the driveway, and Mrs. Trent's roast, and the torn IOU, and how a few degrees here and there had landed him on the terrace in the arms of the princess while the rash lieutenant retched in the grass. Charles laughed. "But, Alexander, that sounds splendid. Surely it's not the reason you left Russia?" "No," admitted the Count, but then he continued with his fateful tale. 7 months passed, Charles. It is the spring of 1914, and I returned to the family estate for a visit. Having paid my respects to my grandmother in the library, I venture outside in search of my sister, Helena, who likes to read under the great elm at the bend in the river. From 100 feet away, I can tell that she is not herself. That is, I can tell that she is more than herself. Upon seeing me, she sits up with a sparkle in her eye and a smile on her lips, clearly eager to share some piece of news, which I am now equally eager to hear. But just as I cross the lawn toward her, she looks over my shoulder and smiles even more brightly to see a lone figure approaching on a steed, a lone figure in the uniform of the Hussars. You see the dilemma the fox had put me in, Charles. While I had been carousing back in Moscow, he had sought my sister out. He had arranged an introduction and then courted her carefully, patiently, successfully. And when he swung down from the saddle and our eyes met, he could barely keep the twist of mirth from his lips. But how was I to explain the situation to Helena, this angel of 1,000 virtues? How was I to tell her that the man she has fallen in love with has sought her affections not due to an appreciation of her qualities, but to settle a score? What did you do? Ah, Charles, what did I do? I did nothing. I thought surely his true nature would find occasion to express itself, much as it had done at the Novobatskys. So, in the weeks that followed, I hovered at the edge of their courtship. I suffered through lunches and teas. I ground my teeth as I watched them stroll through the gardens. But as I bided my time, his self-control surpassed my wildest expectations. He pulled out her chair. He picked blossoms. He read verses. He wrote verses. And always when he caught my eye, there was that little twist in his smile. But then, on the afternoon of my sister's 20th birthday, when he was off on manoeuvres and we were paying a visit to a neighbour, we returned at dusk to find his troika in front of our house. From a glance at Helena, I could sense her elation. He has rushed back all the way from his battalion, she was thinking, to wish me well on my day. She nearly jumped from her horse and ran up the steps, and I followed her like a condemned man to the noose. The Count emptied his glass and slowly set it back onto the bar. But there, inside the entry hall, I did not find my sister in his arms. I found her 2 steps from the door, trembling. Against the wall was Nadezhda, my sister's handmaiden. Her bodice torn open, her arms across her chest, her face scarlet with humiliation. She looked briefly at my sister, then ran up the stairs. In horror, my sister stumbled across the hall, collapsed in a chair, and covered her face with her hands. And our noble lieutenant? He grinned at me like a cat. When I began to express my outrage, he said, "Oh, come now, Alexander. It is Helena's birthday. In her honour, let us call it even." Then, roaring with laughter, he walked out the door without giving my sister a glance.